we're going to look at 3 different methods for credit card interest. This particular problem says that we are using the previous balance method. So for the previous balance method, your finance charge comes from exactly like it says, the previous balance. So our previous balance on my credit card was $1,000. So I take, and it looks like simple interest. It is the simple interest formula, but it's actually APR. So we'll take principal times rate times time, and my principal is $1,000 times rate, and this one is 18%. Now sometimes what we do, instead of using the 18%, we'll take the 18% and divide it by 12. Most books for quantitative literacy will do, instead of the 18% divided by 12, they'll deal with it in the time. And since credit card interest is monthly, what they'll do is they'll do 1 year divided by 12. So we could either put that 1/12 there, or we could do 1,000 times the 18 over 12. And see, when you multiply fractions anyway, you multiply straight across. So it's the same difference. Either way that you do that, you're going to get the same number for your finance charge. And when we do that, 1,000 times 0.18 divided by 12 is $15. So $15 is the finance charge. And in the previous balance method, what you do is you take your previous balance, you add the finance charge, and then you subtract a payment. Now, this particular problem just asks you to find the interest. This is the answer for interest. Finance charge is interest. So if I then go on to say calculate the new balance, this is what you do. So you'll do the 1,000 plus the 15 and then subtract the payment. And so your new balance that will show up at the following month will be $965. So because of interest, even though you paid $50, you don't get credit for the full $50. So in this particular problem, instead of paying 18% interest per year, they may tell you that you're paying 1.5% interest, but it's really 18% per year or 1.5% per month. So this is what you're doing with the actual problem. Now let's look at the next problem. It says calculate the interest on a $1,000 credit card bill that shows an 18% APR, annual percentage rate, using the adjusted balance method. That's the difference in these two problems. Let's scroll back up so you can see. The one we just did was the previous balance method. This one is the adjusted balance method. Adjusted balance means that you're going to adjust the balance before you do the finance charge. So what you do is you take the $1,000 and you adjust it for the payments before you do any kind of finance charge. So your new balance right now before the finance charge is $950. Then you take it and multiply it by the interest rate, which is either 18%, and it's for a year, so we would divide it by 12 just like we did in the previous problem, or we could go ahead and put 1.5% interest in there. So now when we calculate the finance charge, we get $14.25. That's the finance charge. So in this one, the finance charge is calculated after the payment's posted. In this one up here, the finance charge is calculated before the payment is posted. So the finance charge would be $14.25. If I told you I wanted you to calculate the new balance, you would take the $950 plus the $14.25, and your new balance would be $964.25. So new balance would be $964.25. You see the difference here? If you're paying this credit card and you're making a $50 payment, for you, it would be better to do the adjusted balance method. So the bank's probably, if it had to choose between the two, it's probably going to do the previous balance because they get more interest that way. So let's look at another one. This one is probably the hardest method, and unfortunately this is usually the kind that the credit card companies will use. This one is called the average daily balance method. Notice this is the same problem that we've had for all the others. It's just changed the method. For the average daily balance, you have to look at what your balance is for every single day of the month. So you have to know how many days there are in the month. April has 30 days in it. So we are looking at 30 days for this credit card bill. So we start out and we say, okay, at the beginning of the month, I owe $1,000. And we have to determine how many days I owe $1,000. So since it takes 10 days for the payment to be received, I owe $1,000 for 10 days. So the easiest way to do this is probably to make a chart because we're trying to find average. And remember that when you do average, you add everything up and you divide by the total. So if we were doing grades and you had 200s and a 93, you would add up 200 plus 93 and divide by 3. So what we do in average daily balance is we add up the balance for every single day. So I would do 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 for 10 days. So it's easier just to say 1,000 times 10. So that's what we're going to end up doing. Then we have to see what happens when we do have a payment. So we have a payment of $50. 1,000 minus 50 is 950. So my next balance that I have is 950. That's the only payment that I made this month. I didn't make any purchases. If I'd made purchases, I would then have to go back and add because that adds to your balance when you make a purchase. But this one, I just made a payment. And since the $1,000 was for 10 days, there are 20 more days left in the month because April has 30 days. This column has to add up to the number of days that you have in the month. So we would do 1,000 times 10 and 950 times 20. Now, at no time do you owe $10,000 or $19,000. This is the way we get the average. We're adding up all of our daily balances. So we had 1,000 for 10 days. We had 950 for 20 days. And we add those two things up and divide by the number of days in the month. So 29,000 divided by 30 ends up being 966.67. This is your average balance. Never do you really owe 960.67. That's just your average. That's the average that you owe on a daily basis. Sometimes you owe more than that, sometimes you owe less than that, but that's your average. And your average is what you use to calculate the finance charge. Just like you did on all the other problems, you'll use the 18% divided by 12 or 18% times 1 over 12 because you have 12 months in a year and this is monthly. So 966.67 times the 18% divided by 12 comes out to $14.50. Now that's the finance charge, that's the interest. So if I just say find the interest, that's it, you're done. If I say I need you to calculate the new balance that's going to go at the top of your next credit card, your last balance that you had was $950, not $966.67. That's just your average. This was your new balance that you had. This is the finance charge. So the new balance that goes at the top of your credit card is $964.50. That's what's going to be at the top of your next credit card. So this is probably the most complicated kind of credit card interest you could do.